Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 287, and in the main event, we have an incredible middleweight title fight, Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya 2, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for this amazing middleweight matchup. And UFC 287 is just stacked from top to bottom with incredible fights. I could not be more excited for UFC 287, and I've already done a bunch of UFC 287 prediction videos. I will link my entire UFC 287 playlist down in the description if you guys want to go check out any of those predictions after this. And also live on Saturday night, I will be doing a UFC 287 live stream watch along. So if you want to join me live watching the entire UFC 287 card, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications and join me live on Saturday for this massive fight card. So the main event, Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya 2. I could not be more excited for this main event. This is a massive fight, and it just has so many layers that has me absolutely excited for this matchup. First off, this is two of the elite at middleweight. Second, you basically have two amazing backstories behind Pereira versus Adesanya 2. You have the fact that Pereira at UFC 281 in November of last year challenges the long reigning champion of Israel Adesanya for his middleweight title, loses the majority of the fight. Going to the scorecards, Israel Adesanya would have retained his belt. Pereira knew that. He came out in the 5th round looking for a finish and gets a 5th round TKO to snatch the belt off of Israel Adesanya. And then you have the fact that Alex Pereira has 2 wins over Israel Adesanya years ago in kickboxing. And now he follows him over to MMA, follows him over to the UFC. He gets fast-tracked to the title and then beats him again. And now you have the fact that Israel Adesanya has his own personal boogeyman in Alex Pereira. And there couldn't be more bigger stakes for Adesanya in this fight. People are going to say ad nauseum, Pereira's 3-0. And if Pereira wins this fight, he's going to have 2 wins over him in the UFC. Adesanya will never get a chance to avenge those losses again. And if Pereira stays at middleweight, Adesanya's not getting a title fight anytime soon. If you lost twice to the current champion, chances are you're not going to get another opportunity. So this is must win for Adesanya, or he's basically going to have to wait it out until Alex Pereira moves up to 205 to get another opportunity at the belt. So it couldn't be bigger stakes for Adesanya. And for Pereira, if he wants to put Adesanya in his rearview mirror, this is must win for him as well, because if he loses to Israel Adesanya, there will be a trilogy in MMA, which I actually like that idea. I would love to see these guys fight a million times, but this fight is just so compelling, amazing backstory, super high skill level, and there's nothing as a fight fan. You couldn't ask for much more in this fight. I mean, I know some people love the back and forth trash talk. Even Pereira has been talking a little bit of trash to Adesanya. So you even have that little bit of a component there. That doesn't interest me too much. But this fight, I cannot wait for Saturday night. It's such a compelling matchup, and it couldn't be bigger stakes on the line for both men. Now, if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, you have Pereira, who is 7-1. Adesanya is 23-2. Pereira is the current middleweight champion. Adesanya is ranked number 1 in the middleweight division. Pereira is 35. Adesanya is 33. They are both 6'4", and they both have an 80-inch reach. The thing that stands out to me most there is the MMA experience level for Adesanya. Many more MMA fights than Alex Pereira. So if you look at Israel Adesanya, of his 23 pro MMA wins, 15 by knockout, 8 by decision, 2 losses, once by KO or TKO, and once by decision. Now, we're going to look at Israel Adesanya's resume, but we're not going to necessarily talk about the Pereira kickboxing matchups or the most recent fight at UFC 281. We're going to talk about all those fights later in the video, right before I get to my prediction. But his last fight was Alex Pereira at UFC 281, where he got stopped in the 5th round. We'll talk about that fight later in the video. The fight before that was at UFC 276 against Jared Cannonier. He went out there, basically, beat up Jared Cannonier from range, leg kick, jabs, and Jared Cannonier really just had nothing to offer. It wasn't a super compelling matchup. It wasn't a super compelling fight, and Adesanya just kind of coasted to a unanimous decision win. The fight before that was in February of 2022 against Robert Whittaker, one of the best middleweights in the weight class. He went out there, he beat Robert Whittaker. It was a competitive fight. It was a closer fight than the first fight where Adesanya got the stoppage win, but I thought Adesanya clearly won. There were some people saying that Whittaker should have got this win, But I think Adesanya took this fight. But nonetheless, even if you want to say that Robert Whittaker won, it was super competitive, and Robert Whittaker is still one of the best middleweights in the world and a former champion. The fight before that, he beat Marvin Vettori at UFC 263. And this was a fight that wasn't super compelling. It wasn't super competitive. Adesanya just beat him up at range, avoided the takedown. I think got taken down once, got back to his feet, and just beat up Marvin Vettori from range. And that's just a common theme for Israel Adesanya. The fight before that, he fought Jan Blachowicz. He moved up to 205 pounds and in the light heavyweight division. And Jan Blachowicz, a very good striker, and also has some decent grappling, and he's much bigger than Israel Adesanya. He outstruck him, he outgrappled him, and Israel Adesanya's opportunity to become a two-division champion, he ended up losing a unanimous decision to Jan Blachowicz, and that's his last loss, and his only other loss in MMA outside of Alex Pereira. And before that, he had a brutal TKO victory over Paulo Costa at UFC 253. We're getting back to September of 2020, and we're talking about his initial run as champion. And he went out there, and a lot of people thought that Costa was going to be able to put the pressure on him, land the big shots. And Adesanya just went out there and put on a masterclass performance against Paulo Costa. And this was a matchup that, I was really looking forward to, and Adesanya just made him look like he did not even belong there. And then we're getting back to even older fights, a snoozer against Joel Romero, which I wish I could forget, and then his TKO win over Robert Whittaker, where he finished him back in UFC 243 to become the undisputed middleweight champion. Now, if you look at Alex Pereira, it is crazy to me that he only has 8 fights in MMA, but if you look at his combat sports record, he also has 33 kickboxing matchups. And of those 33 kickboxing fights, he has 21 KOs. So he has some experience. But also, I did want to mention before I forget, Adesanya in kickboxing, 75 kickboxing fights. So Adesanya, whether it's kickboxing or MMA, is much more experienced. And it's hard to believe that Pereira, with 8 fights, has become the UFC middleweight champion. He was signed to the UFC back in, I believe it was 2021, and he gets his UFC debut against Andreas Michailidis. And in that first round, it looked like he was going to get out-grappled. He was getting controlled against the fence. He got taken down. He was having some success getting back to his feet, but it just didn't look good for him. Michailidis was wearing on him. And then in the second round, he lands a flying knee and brutally KOs Andreas Michailidis. Then he gets a step up in competition against Bruno Silva. And a lot of people thought he was going to KO Bruno Silva and it was going to be an easy matchup. This was a competitive fight. Now, he hurt Bruno Silva multiple times, but Bruno Silva was really wearing on him with the clinch and the takedown attempts. But ultimately, Pereira wins a unanimous decision. The fight after that is Sean Strickland at UFC 276, the same fight card that Adesanya fought Cannonier on. And this fight was kind of, the UFC picked who in the top 10 is least likely to grapple Alex Pereira, and that was Sean Strickland. And Alex Pereira went out there and put on a phenomenal performance. He was pumping the left-hand jab to the body over and over and over again. And then when Sean Strickland got used to that, he came over the top with a left hand, then landed a follow-up right and just brutally finished Sean Strickland in the first round to propel him to a title shot against Israel Adesanya. Now that's where we get to the Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira kickboxing matchups. And these happened so many years ago. You have Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira many, many, many years ago. And what happened in the first fight was you had Adesanya essentially outstriking Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira was moving forward, landing decent shots, but essentially Adesanya should have won this fight. And when they went to the scorecards, for whatever reason, Alex Pereira got the decision. And I think it's pretty much unanimously accepted that Adesanya should have won the first kickboxing matchup. But this is all the way back in 2016. Well, then they had a rematch in kickboxing again. This was Adesanya's last fight in kickboxing in 2017. And Alex Pereira gets hurt badly in the second round. He gets a standing 8 count. And then he survives, he's able to go on, and in the third round, he comes back and brutally KOs Israel Adesanya. Now, before we get to their MMA fight at UFC 281, I think a lot of people are looking into these kickboxing matchups a little bit too much. We're literally talking 6 and 7 years ago. I think both Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya have vastly evolved and vastly improved since those original kickboxing fights. I think they are completely different fighters at this point. They have improved that much. Now you get to the fight at UFC 281 back in November of last year, where you have Adesanya now in MMA. He's been in MMA a while. He's defended his belt quite a bit. And you have Alex Pereira getting fast-tracked to the title. And Alex Pereira already has those 2 wins over him in kickboxing. People are wondering, can he do it again? First round. Adesanya, I thought Adesanya was just barely winning the first round. It was very competitive. And then at the end of the first round, lands a combination that wobbles Alex Pereira. And had there been 5 or 10 more seconds on the clock, I think Israel Adesanya would have won this fight by first round KO. Then you get to the second round. And this actually really impressed me of Alex Pereira. He came out and won the second round. It was a close, competitive second round, but I thought it was very clear for Alex Pereira. He was landing good leg kicks, good jabs, and it was crazy to me that he got rocked so badly. He was wobbly going back to his corner. And for him to be able to come out and win that second round against Israel Adesanya was incredible. Then you have the third round where neither guy's really winning just yet, and Pereira throws a kick. Adesanya catches it, and then I think Pereira pulls the kick out of Adesanya's hand, and they're in a weird, almost clinch position, and Pereira looks for a trip. And Adesanya uses a body lock, uses his weight, trips him down, and ends up on top of Pereira on the ground, and then just controls him for the rest of the round. He got him down, I think, with 3 or 4 minutes left in the third round, beats him up. Pereira tries to get back to his feet, but Adesanya had great wrist control, was landing good ground and pound, and just would not allow Pereira to get back to his feet and get back to what he wanted to do in the striking. Then you have the fourth round. Israel Adesanya outstriking him on the feet. He looked for a few more takedowns, wasn't really able to get them. And Pereira was just not putting out a whole lot of output in the fourth round. And Adesanya landed the better shots, was landing leg kicks, landing body kicks, and won the fourth round pretty clearly. And then you have the fifth round. Very competitive. But the second the fifth round started, Alex Pereira was headhunting Israel Adesanya. He knew he was down on the scorecards. He knew he had to come out and get a finish in the fifth round if he wanted to win the middleweight belt. And he lands a nasty left hand. He's just pressuring Adesanya. He's cutting off the cage. Adesanya is trying to use his lateral movement to get out of the way, but Pereira lands that left hand, hurts him, lands a big right hand, starts swarming him. Adesanya kind of trips a little bit against the fence, gets back up. Pereira starts swarming him. He actually doesn't land a whole lot of the fight-ending sequence. He lands maybe 4 out of 10 shots, and Mark Goddard steps in. Now, my opinion of this fight when it happened, I thought it was a bit of an early stoppage, but I thought ultimately, I don't think it changed the outcome of the fight. I think Pereira would have found a finish anyway, and maybe it was better for Adesanya that Goddard stopped it a little bit early, because Pereira could have brutally flatline KO'd him. But I do believe Adesanya was still there. He was hurt, but I think he was still there, and I would have liked to have seen it play out a little bit more. But ultimately, I don't think it was going to change the outcome a whole lot. And this just showed to me that Alex Pereira, faced adversity, got hurt badly in the first round, got out grappled in the third round, comes out in the fifth round knowing he's down on the scorecards and finds a finish against Israel Adesanya. It was an incredible moment in MMA. It was an incredible finish. And it was just crazy to me that after being down on the scorecards, we've seen it so many times recently. We saw it with Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman 2 back at UFC 278. We saw it with Yuri Prochazka, Glover Teixeira. Same situation. The champion up on the scorecards gets finished in the fifth round, and then we see it in this fight. Now, what did we learn from this fight? What I learned from this fight is I think Israel Adesanya is the superior striker. And I know that sounds crazy to say, but he was outstriking Pereira for the majority of the fight. And he was landing big shots. He landed big shots in the first round. He landed big shots in the second round. The third round was primarily grappling. He landed big shots in the fourth round. But Pereira has a good chin. He only really got rocked badly in that first round, the end of the first round. And also we learned in that first fight in MMA that Pereira is just relentless. He's an absolute killer. He's a savage. And I think in this fight, you have an Alex Pereira who has to get the KO. I know there's some people who think, he could probably win a decision. I just think with that power advantage, we've seen it 3 times already in combat sports. I know a lot of people like to bring up the kickboxing fights. We've seen it 3 times. Adesanya is winning the fight. Pereira gets the stoppage. We've seen him get the stoppage twice, but in the first kickboxing matchup, it was a decision that Adesanya should have gotten. But I just think that Adesanya is the more technical striker. I think he has a little bit better movement. And I just think in this matchup, in this second fight in MMA, I think Pereira has to find the finish. But that's not necessarily difficult for him because he's constantly brutally KOing everyone. I mean, of his MMA fights, he has 7 wins. And of those 7 wins, 6 are by KO or TKO. So he only has gone to decision once, and that was against Bruno Silva. So he always finds that finish, and it's that nasty left hook. And I think this fight is difficult to pick because you have an Alex Pereira who just finished Israel Adesanya in his last fight. But you have the fact that Adesanya won the majority of the fight, would have won it on the scorecards if he didn't get finished. But that's a big if there because he did get finished. And he got finished, back in 2017 in kickboxing as well. So I think Alex Pereira is such a good striker. And Adesanya, in his MMA career, he's never had to go against such a high-level striker like Alex Pereira in MMA. And I just think that Alex Pereira's power, his size, his speed is just so elite. And he just is able to find that left hand time and time again. And I look at Adesanya. I see him as a smaller guy. I see him as the more technical guy. I see him as the faster guy. But he has to avoid that left hand. And I've tossed this fight back and forth. My early prediction for the first MMA fight was Alex Pereira. Then when we got to the fight, I switched my prediction by Israel Adesanya to late, like fourth round TKO. I picked Israel Adesanya in the first fight at UFC 281. For this fight, my official prediction is going to be Israel Adesanya via second round KO. And I just think what I've seen in those previous matchups, I just think Israel Adesanya has hurt Pereira. He's almost finished him twice, almost put him away in the past, in the second kickboxing matchup, and then in the first MMA fight. And he's landed such good shots. And I just think in this fight, I think he's going to come out a little bit more aggressively. I think he's not going to let Pereira cut him off and pressure him as much as he did in the last fight, because that's where Pereira's success is. When he's coming out, he's moving forward, he's pressing Israel Adesanya backwards. That's where he's having his success. And when Adesanya's throwing and backing Pereira up, because Pereira has to respect the striking of Adesanya, I just think it's not going to be super successful for Pereira if he's being backed up. We've seen it time and time again. He's not having success when he's moving backwards. Adesanya can have success when he's moving backwards or when he's moving forward. And I think the key to this fight for Israel Adesanya is not getting complacent on the cage. And, he blamed in the last fight, he had an issue with the peroneal nerve from one of Alex Pereira's kicks where his leg kind of got deadened and numbed. And I think in this fight, we're going to see an Adesanya who has much more lateral movement. I think in the first MMA fight, he got too complacent with his back against the fence because he was backing up against the fence and he was landing good shots. And then he would circle out and then he would back up against the fence again and he would land good shots. And I think in this fight, I think he's not going to get his back against the fence because when Pereira gets your back against the fence, you're in a massive disadvantage because now you can only go 2 ways versus if you're in the center of the cage, you can go 4 ways. Because if you're backed up against the fence, you can only go left or right. If you're out in the center, you can go forward, backwards, or left or right. And then Pereira backs him up and then leaps in and lands that left hook. And that's kind of how he found the finish at UFC 281. And I just think Adesanya, he's going to review the fight. He's going to come in with a good game plan. I think he's more motivated than ever. And in this fight, I just think that Adesanya knows that he lands, and he lands very good on Pereira's chin. And I think he's going to put a little bit more power in those punches. And I think he's going to be moving a little bit better. And I think Pereira, now that he has the confidence in his head, I finished him twice. I'm going to finish him again. I think Pereira is going to come out more aggressive. And I think that stylistic matchup of a pressure fighter is the perfect matchup for Israel Adesanya. He's an amazing counter striker. And I think Adesanya is going to land a big shot in that second round, maybe late second round. And I think he's going to KO Alex Pereira. And I think it's going to be shocking for most people. I just think he has the more technical striking. I think when you look at the previous fights and you look at the fact that Adesanya has won maybe 85%, 90% of the previous, 3 fights in combat sports, I just have to pick Adesanya. How many times can lightning strike? We've already had it twice with 2 KOs for Alex Pereira. I don't think it's going to happen again. I think Israel Adesanya is going to be moving well. I think he's going to be throwing good leg kicks, good body kicks. And Pereira has great leg kicks as well. And he was chopping the legs of Adesanya, and I think that's a massive key for him to limit the movement of Adesanya and then pressuring him and cutting off the cage, which I think is a massive strength for Pereira. But I just think Adesanya is going to be more motivated than ever. I think he's going to dissect the last fight. And I think Adesanya, one thing people don't give him credit for, he has a very high fight IQ. And I just can't imagine a world where he gets caught again. I just don't think Adesanya is going to let it happen. I think he's going to be in and out. I think he's going to be super technical in this fight. I think he's going to be moving his feet very well. Adesanya is known for his footwork. He's known for his angles. And Pereira, he can't just wade in and not respect Adesanya's striking. And I think in this fight, he will. I think he'll be looking for an earlier finish. I think he thinks he's going to go in there and bully Israel Adesanya in the earlier rounds. And I think he's going to get clipped by Adesanya. And I think he's going to get put to sleep in the late second round. And I think this is going to be a fight where now we're going to end up with a trilogy in MMA because Adesanya is going to get it done. Now, if Adesanya doesn't find the finish, I think Adesanya probably wins via decision as well. I think Adesanya is going to win this fight. I think he can mix in the grappling. I don't think he's going to have a lot of success with the takedown because Pereira, while he doesn't have a lot of MMA experience and he's not the best grappler, he has good takedown defense and he's very good at making you pay in the clinch. But we've seen in the last fight, Israel Adesanya had the advantage in the clinch. But Pereira was landing some knees, landing some body shots. But I just don't think, unless Adesanya in a weird, scramble of events where, he catches a kick similar to the last fight and then gets a body lock takedown, I just don't see Adesanya. His offensive wrestling just isn't there to be shooting double legs in the center of the cage. But I think he can mix it in just to get Pereira thinking about it. And I just think he's going to be circling very well, pumping the jab, moving very well. And I think he knows, I cannot get caught in this fight. And don't be surprised if Adesanya gets up on the scorecards. Don't be surprised if he starts coasting and moving, and people are going to say, oh, he's kind of stalling here. Because if Adesanya gets up, he's going to say, look, all I have to do is not get caught here, and I get this win over Alex Pereira, and then we can have a trilogy fight in MMA. But ultimately, I think it's a super exciting fight. I do think it can go either way, but I just can't imagine Adesanya getting caught again. He knows what he has to do in this fight, and he knows this is his last chance to defeat Alex Pereira. I think he gets it done. I think his striking is better. I think his kicks are better. And I think, does Pereira have a massive size and power advantage? Yes, but that weight cut's got to catch up to you eventually. And, having a massive weight cut, cutting down from 210 or 220, it's going to have an effect. Adesanya is not that big. And Adesanya doesn't have that big of a weight cut. And eventually, one of these days, Adesanya keeps rocking him in each fight. He's going to find a finish. And I think ultimately, at UFC 287, Israel Adesanya gets a second round KO. And I think he wins his middleweight title back, and we get a trilogy. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And thank you so much for watching.